We hear a lot of perspectives on the Mankind podcast. Inclusion of a guest is not an endorsement of their views, and the opinions expressed here do not always represent the mission or values of the Mankind Project USA.
Looks like the rain has gone.
Hey everybody, it's Boysen Hodgson. Welcome back to the Mankind Podcast. On February 25th, Brandon Clift and I posted an episode with our friend and our colleague, Michael Russer, called Dying to Live, How to Face Death with Radical Presence. A week later, Saturday, March 4th, Michael took his last breaths surrounded by his loved ones and family. He died as he always strived to live with choice and consciousness and presence and love. My family got to speak with Michael and Jacqueline a few days before he passed. Kendra and Lee and Ada and I gathered around the Zoom screen right here together, and each of us had the chance to tell Michael that we loved him and what he meant to us as a family. Michael and I continued to text back and forth until Friday night, and the last exchange we had was a series of just terrible dad jokes about an awkward side effect of morphine, which he had been prescribed to manage his increasing pain, constipation. So my wife, Kendra, just rolled her eyes as Michael and I exchanged some truly shitty jokes. And that was how it was, the sacred and the profane side by side. Miss you, Michael. And as we've said before, the conversations don't stop, but they do change. So, dear listeners, tell the people you love that you love them. And that, my friends, is part of men's work. And for this week's episode in the Mankind Project, we talk about doing the work. And when we talk about the work, we're talking about emotional and psychological labor that it takes to become an integrated being, right? Human, fully human. What's life like when you discover that the work is worth doing no matter how old you are? This week, I talk with Peter Clothier, an author, an artist, a kind of master of words, a meditator, a contemplator. Peter Clothier is 86 years old. His latest book, Dear Harry, is a deep exploration of his relationship with his dad, of the hidden darkness that men can hold on to for decades. Now, the process of engaging with memory and story can create a new way of being, body, mind, spirit, and soul. So some of the questions are, how do we re-narrate our lives and heal our pasts? How does sharing with others through a kind of confessional bring us closer together? How do we create relationships with people who are no longer here? How can we embrace practices like meditation and contemplation in our pursuit of art as a way to connect and expand our understanding? Peter's empathy and compassion for himself and for all of us flow in his storytelling in such a beautiful and gentle way. This conversation is what happens when eldership is nurtured through practice. Please enjoy. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Mankind Podcast. It's Boysen Hodgson. Mankind Podcast, where we are setting out to prove that there is more than one way to be a man, and I think we're doing a pretty fine job. Today I get to sit down with Peter Clothier. Peter and I have been in connection for some number of years, probably 10 or more years, because Peter is an artist in words. He is a writer. He was connected with the Mankind Project through the Mankind Project Journal and many other things that we'll go into. but I'm going to give you a little bit of background. First, say hi, Peter.
Hi, thank you for having me on, Poison. It's great to see you. Great to talk to you, always.
Thank you. Peter is an internationally known writer specializing in writing about art and artists. He believes in avoiding the jargon that obscures much current writing about art and in simply writing clearly in language that a layperson can readily understand. He seeks to achieve a harmony of mind, heart, and body in his work. We're going to touch on that. And looks for this quality in the artists he writes about. He's a reformed academic, now 15 years in recovery, probably more than 15 years in recovery now.
A lot more now.
A lot more. He's returned in recent years to teaching in mostly non-traditional ways in workshops, continuing groups. We're going to touch on some of that as well, and individual coaching and mentoring for artists and writers. Peter is multiply published. He has volumes of poetry. He has novels. He has memoirs. He has a long meditation practice that we'll probably touch on. And we're going to talk about his newest book, Dear Harry, Letters to My Father, today. So, Peter, thank you. Welcome.
Thank you.
First of all, we just touched on the fact that you have been a new warrior. You have been connected to the Mankind Project since 1992.
That's right. Yes.
What have you learned in 30 years of being a new warrior and doing the work, as we say?
Well, I think that's exactly it. I think it's what I learned in I was 55 years old already when I went through the training. And I had kind of breezed through my life thinking that everything was normal and right until I hit a wall and signed up for the training. I think what I discovered was that there is such a thing as work, and that work is worth doing. You used that word. I think it's a great word. I have been doing work ever since in a variety of ways. And Dear Harry, for me, is another way of doing work, because there was a big gap in my life, the gap between me and my father, who died some 25 years ago. So I was no longer able to talk to him in person. But I started writing this series of letters. And it was my way of doing that work with my father, of coming to terms with him emotionally and as a man, which I had never been able to do during his life or during mine. So that's it. I mean, I think in answer to your question, what I got out of the training was the whole idea of work on myself, coming to try to understand more about myself, who I am, how I am in this world, and the world around me. That is always work.
And it doesn't stop. That's you and I, when we reconnected just a few weeks ago to kind of check in, like, we talk about the hero's journey in the Mankind Project, right? We talk about going through that cycle of separation and the road of trials and facing the ordeal and coming back and capturing the boon and beginning a process of reintegration and bringing it back to community. And so our listeners can't see you, but tell us how old you are, Peter.
I'm 96 now. 96, I exaggerate.
86.
I'm only 86. Why did I say that? That's extraordinary. I added 10 years to my life without even thinking about it.
86, and the
86.
work continues, and the work keeps going.
Yes.
I just think that's so beautiful. So let's talk about Dear Harry, and I'm a portion of the way through the book, and this book is super emotionally evocative all the way through, and in ways that are sometimes uncomfortable. Yes. In the book. So talk about how this book came to be, and talk a little bit more about your process of doing the work through the book.
Yes, it's an interesting process. It happened because I was reading another book by a writer I admire very much. Wrote a book called The Hair with Amber Eyes.
Mm.
And I loved that book. And when he came out with a new book fairly recently, Letters to Komodo, I immediately ordered and read that. It was a series of letters, and it was a memoir in the form of letters. And I just found myself starting to write these letters to my father based on that model, understanding that this writer, Edmund de Waal, was trying to reach through to the past through the medium of letters. It's an epistolary form. And the more I got into it, the more I realized, I had a whole process in front of me.
Mm-hmm.
And it started out with thinking, I need to get to know my father better.
Yeah.
And I got to a certain point in the book where I realized that's not quite it. I need my father to know me. And so that was a big transitional moment in the book. And what the result was that we got to know each other through these letters. And yeah.
Tell us a little bit about Harry, so you learned more about your dad, you learned more about yourself, but give us a little bit of framing for where you came from and how your relationship with your father was.
My father, I grew up in an English country village. My father was the rector of the village. This was during World War II. And they were in many ways wonderful years because even though the war was going on, that was a very formative experience. We had all kinds of people coming to live in the house. We had a big old Victorian rectory with so many rooms. We didn't know what to do with them all. So people were billeted in our house, people from the Air Force and the Navy, and principally the Bletchley girls. We were not far from Bletchley Park, where the Enigma machine was in full blast, translating Nazi codes.
Wow.
And so we had three of the Bletchley girls living in our house, lovely young women. I was only 4 or 5, 6 years old, so I knew very little about young women, but I do have very, very vivid memories of them. My father was a minister.
Mm-hmm.
He was in constant pain, and I have always thought, as I said in the book, that the physical pain was an outward manifestation of his struggle with his own faith.
Mm-hmm.
He was an extraordinarily intelligent man. He was a Cambridge graduate. He studied psychology, which in the 1920s was a pretty advanced area of study.
Yeah.
And he knew a lot about Freud and Jung and human nature from that point of view. So he was extraordinarily well-informed man, and I think that his intellectual side had a lot of constant struggle with his faith. And I think that manifested in him as pain. But my experience of him was as the man standing up there at the altar with his arms spread, talking to God, or up in the pulpit delivering the message for that particular Sunday. And so it was a very fraught relationship, although I didn't understand it at the time as such. I only understood it in retrospect as being such a fraught relationship. And he was also, I mean, he was English in the sense that he found it very difficult, despite all he knew about psychology, found it very difficult to express his emotions. He had
Yes.
been trained, as many English people of his generation and of my own generation, that emotions were a dangerous thing to play around with. That you didn't talk to them about talk to other people about them. You kept them to yourself. And so there was that
Yes.
aspect too. We did not communicate on that level. And I can't remember ever, for example, him having told me that he loved me. Although, I knew for sure that he did. I never had
Hmm.
any doubt about it, but the words weren't there. The
You,
the gestures weren't there. The hugs, those kinds of things that today I take for granted with my grandson. You know,
mm,
this is an important part of our relationship, but not back then. That was, in the 1940s. It was a very different time.
you said at the beginning of the book, it's beautiful that you went right there to my father didn't tell me he loved me. In one of your very first letters, you expressed that something that I also carry myself. I've heard lots of men in Mankind Project, in men's groups, in this kind of work say, my father never told me he loved me. And there's still, even though I have empathy and my compassion goes out to these men, and there's still some judging voice in my head that thinks, well, we shouldn't need that.
Yes,
There's
me too.
you
Yes,
expressed in the book, you called it whining.
yes.
T- why are we still here with that, Peter?
I don't know. I think in fact we are growing beyond it. I think we're in that
Mm,
process now in our cultural lives. I wish the same could be true of our political lives, but I think we have progressed an awful long way in understanding the importance of those things and uh, the importance of relationships in our lives. We've
yeah.
come a long way. And you and
Some
I mean, look at the in the 30 years that since I first enrolled in the training adventure. I mean, my life has not been the same since. In any sense, it's been so enriched by coming to that understanding that I did have emotions, that they were important in my life, that they did enrich my life. Those things, yeah.
yes. Yes, and the kind of evolution. Yeah, we talked about this before we started the recording, but the evolution of the work that have seen many men go through, and this is seems true for you also. That I started out with very little understanding of my emotions. Then I learned that there were these emotions that I could actually work with and understand and speak to and get literate and fluent with, and then progress a few years later, and I pick up a practice of meditation, and I pick up a different kind of somatic practice of working through the body and taking that fluency. Talk about that, because I know that you are a man with a long meditative practice of meditation. So talk about how that's informed your life.
That's something that I came to after a couple of years after I did the new warrior training. I did the warrior monk training with Bill Calf,
Right. With Bill.
and I also staffed a couple of warrior monks. And that led me into another area of if I once described the training adventure as boot camp for the emotions, and Warrior Monk as boot camp for the soul.
Mm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I have always had this part of me, and this came from childhood. We were talking about my father and his ministry and the church and so on. Those are enormously formative parts of who I am. But I had
Mm-hmm.
thrown them out. As soon as I left home, as soon as I'd done my university studies, and I threw all that out. I was too smart for it. I didn't think that
Mm-hmm.
it was necessary. I looked at religion and I thought, ridiculous. And I did that for many, many years. And it was only after the warrior training and the warrior monk training that I realized this is a big part of my life that's missing. I mean, I always think that integrity has four parts. It has the intellect, the emotions, the physical, the body, and the soul. And I had been missing two parts of that. I'd been missing the spiritual part. I'd been missing the emotional part. And now I came
Mm.
to the point where I recognized that's something I need to build into my life. And so I did. I became involved with a meditation group. I started out doing 5, 10 minutes a day, thinking I was pretty good. Keep my mind, slowing my mind down for that long. And then I discovered there was a little sitting group in Laguna Beach where I live part time. And I called to find out about it. And the woman who answered the phone said, "Well, we start out sitting for an hour." And I thought, sit for an hour? Who could sit for an hour with my busy mind? But I went anyway, and I sat the first time for an hour. And I discovered I wasn't bored out of my mind. I didn't go crazy. And in fact, I
Mm.
felt kind of good about having done it. So that opened the door to a meditation practice that I have been following ever since. I practice an hour a day. No, I'm sorry. I practice a half hour a day, every day.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
barely ever miss. And it's a deeply important part of my life and has opened other doors to me and created more more possibilities for the work that we were talking about. I think one thing I might like to mention is that
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
wife and I are now in a very difficult situation. She was diagnosed
Yeah.
with uterine cancer. It's developed into stomach cancer, and she is going through a course of chemotherapy, and she has had other attendant circumstances. Her health has been a terrible challenge for the past year, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
think that what I have experienced, both through the emotional boot camp and the spiritual boot camp, has equipped me to be supportive in a way I don't think I could have done before going through that. So they're, they prepared me for what I need to do now. It's worth mentioning, I think.
Yeah.
So,
And I think it is definitely worth mentioning. And what are the capacities that you feel it's prepared you? So what has changed in your capacities through doing this kind of work?
I'm able to listen. I'm able to
Mm.
understand the emotional struggle that's going on for her and for myself as we go through this. And that understanding gives me a perspective on it that I wouldn't otherwise have had. So I'm not in the same way, this is a Buddhist concept, attached to it. I can experiencing it without that clinging on. I'm able to emotionally, spiritually let it go, even as I experience it. So I don't have that attachment that brings about suffering. Not that there isn't suffering. I mean, there is, um, um,
Right.
but I'm better equipped to live with that suffering and experiencing it and grow from it. than I would have been otherwise.
Beautiful. Thank you. That capacity for presence, the capacity to sit in another kind of Buddhist thing, in the awareness space, right? Just to sit
Yes.
with the awareness rather than with the,
Yes.
yeah. Yeah.
Well, you
Yeah,
talking
there's
about
something
space.
that,
You were talking originally when we first got online together before we started this actual process. You were admiring my
yeah.
physical space, and I think that there is
Yes.
a powerful relationship between one's physical space and one's mental space, one's psychic space. Here in this house, we are open, as you noticed. We have high ceilings.
Mm-hmm.
We surround ourselves with beautiful things like paintings and art objects. So, that's all a part of the experience of life.
Beautiful. I'm going to ask another question about art, but I wanted to kind of, there's this thing that happens in men's work, and certainly happened to me, where when I first started doing men's work, the emotional work, that emotional body, the emotional stuff, investment, there was this idea that, oh my God, if I actually allow myself to feel the blank, to feel the anger, to feel the grief, to feel the shame, whatever that is, that I will get lost in it.
Mm-hmm.
And the learning process of emotional literacy became, oh, I now recognize that I will not disappear. I won't get lost. I won't cry forever.
Yeah.
And then this spiritual piece goes even like, wow, I can be disconnected. I can recognize that I can take a step back from this ego thing, from this
Yes.
construct that I have as me,
Yeah.
right? And take even another step back from that kind of attachment I will get lost in. Yeah, meditation has taught me that I can go to a place that's very, very different than this kind of I-ness of sitting in my own brain and
There's that
still come
wonderful
back.
there's that wonderful mantra that I often return to. This is not me, this is not mine, this is not who I am. And what you're saying describes perfectly the wisdom contained in that mantra. This is not me, this is not mine, this is not who I am. And that it allows you to distance yourself, as you put it, from the suffering.
So another question about art, and I know that you wanted to speak to this. So you've been involved in the art world. So your medium is words, but you have been involved in the art world for a very long time. And you told me about something called one painting, 1 hour, or 1 hour, one painting. Which was it?
Yes, it's 1 hour, 1 hour, one painting. I
Talk about
started
that.
out life as a writer, as a poet, my adult life, my professional life. And I went into academia thinking that this was a good way to make a living and pursue my interests as a writer. And well, for various reasons, it didn't work out. But one of the things that occurred at quite early in my academic career was that I met Ellie, my wife,
Mm-hmm.
whose family was deeply involved in the art world. They had a beautiful art collection, and which went eventually to the county museum, and um, and so she had been brought up surrounded by art, and she got me interested. She started taking me out to galleries and so on, and so I started to get more interested in art than I was in literature. And because I wasn't qualified to teach art in academia, I moved on from teaching to administration. I became dean of an art school, and I was dean
Mm.
of colleges for a number of years after that. But yeah, so and because I was interested in art, and because my medium is words, I started writing about art, and over the years became, I like to think of myself as an art writer rather than a critic, because I never liked the word critic, and I never liked the activity of criticism. But that's what I did for many years. I wrote art criticism for national magazines, and so that was how I got involved in the art world, how I stayed professionally in the art world throughout my professional life until fairly recently, and I started getting more interested in writing again and turning not away from the art world, but more into my own concerns as a writer. I'm not sure if that
And
answers
talk
your
about
question.
1 hour, one painting.
Yes. Okay. I forgot about that. So, what happened when I started getting interested in meditation and was observing how I was going through galleries as a fairly prominent art critic, going through galleries and, spending 10 seconds, 20 seconds with any particular painting and then moving on and going home then and writing a review of this show, I realized, you know, I'm not unusual in this, but we spend extraordinarily little time looking at the art that we claim to love. So
Mm.
and I was starting, I had done my 1 hour of meditation, and I thought, why not put those things together? 1 hour, one painting. And I saw it as a way to blend two very ancient skills. One is meditation, the other is contemplation. Meditation is eyes closed,
Ah, lovely.
inside. Contemplation is eyes open, outside. So I thought, well, let's put these two things together. And so I thought I would try it out. And I offered it at my first 1 hour, one painting experience was at the Los Angeles County Museum. And I did it with a painting from Ellie's family collection, which I knew very well, Montauk Highway. And we had all these doctors and lawyers and so on, the support group, important people from the museum support group. And I thought, oh my God, they're going to be so horribly
Mm.
bored. They're going to be looking at their watches, wondering when this is over and so on. I took them through a whole hour, partly closed eye work, meditation, partly open eye work, contemplation, looking at the painting, not making judgments about it, but just looking at what was there. And I walked them through the painting, what to look at, when to be looking at it, and so on. And everybody loved it.
Mm.
So I started my whole career as a teacher, meditation leader in galleries and museums. I've been doing it ever since. I love to do it, and people love the experience. So it's a great way to look at art, and it's a new way to look at art because very, very few people spend a whole hour looking at a painting, at one work of art. And so it's a lovely
Fascinating.
experience.
I'll put a link to Montauk Highway in the show notes down below so that
Okay,
you can
great.
take a
It's
look at
Willem de
it and
Kooning, by the
experience
way.
it. William de Kooning.
Willem de Kooning.
Thank you. Let's go back to Dear Harry, and I'm actually going to go to a section of the book. And I'm going to pick up at the end of a letter. Why you didn't gently lead me into what I so much needed at the time, but did not know how to ask for because I was so terribly embarrassed. Because you understood these things. You understood that people, especially little children, need to talk about things that hurt them, need to be heard, even if they themselves don't know it, need to be forgiven, need to be consoled. Surely you knew that, Harry. I know it's too late now to ask, but there's something in me that still wants you to understand and still believes that somehow just the act of writing a letter like this one can fulfill that need. Silly me that it still hurts, now that I'm an old man, older than any of us were back then, and I hope a lot wiser, but strangely, yes it does. In any case, this was another occasion when I could have used a hug.
Oh.
That's beautiful writing, thank you. And there's something in this book throughout that has the aspect of healing.
Yes.
It's like a confessional, and the healing process of using language, of using reflection, of using memory. Talk about confessional and talk about the healing process that happened for you in writing.
Well, let me talk about the healing first, because it is one of the themes of the book. And my father was a great believer um, in healing, in spiritual healing, the laying on of hands, and that was a skill, an art that he practiced in his own life. There's a wonderful episode about Hank the dog and the wart on his head, and how the blacksmith healed the wart and then subsequently healed the warts on my own hand. So, he was a great believer in healing and the use of psychic powers, spiritual powers to bring about healing. So that's one part of it. The other, the confession part of it, I don't know, confession is just airing parts of yourself that cause shame or guilt, and bringing them out into the air. The mere fact of bringing them out into the air, and particularly sharing them with another human being, is a form of healing in itself. That I have learned that to tell other people about my pain, my suffering, the things that I'm going through in my life that I don't understand, that sharing those things helps me to find common ground with them. And it's what I've learned through partly through this book, but partly through other things that I've written, is that when I really get down into the heart of the matter myself, into what's really hurting, or what's really causing me joy, or whatever it is that's happening inside, when I can share that with another human being, what I do is touch something in their soul. I get the response, and that mutuality is a healing process. That being with another human being who has the same experience, or an experience that is close to yours, so that they look at you and say, I see you. Right? So I show myself in the hope that others will see me. And that showing myself, that's what confession is, as I understand it.
And how has this book helped you divest? I don't know why the word divest came, but how has this book helped you shed another layer of that withheld self for the world?
Well, almost every page of the book has a confession of some kind. And writing those things out and bringing them out into the world, the most private parts of myself, things having to do with sexuality, molestation as a child, my moments of anger, my moments of betrayal, when I betrayed other people, all those things, to bring them out into the world instead of holding them inside myself. That's a process that I learned initially with the New Warrior Training Adventure. That's what guts work is about, right? That's the center of the core of the training. That bringing out stuff that is inside and can be causing that great damage, great harm, and suffering. And to bring it out into the world is to heal, as you put it.
For our listeners out there, you don't get to experience what it's like even by Zoom, to just kind of sit in a room with Peter and be in his presence. But what a beautiful man you are. What a pleasure it is to just sit and see your expression. Thank you. So from this space, so I am 30 years, 35 years your junior. And, I feel like I'm a wise guy sometimes, feel like I know a bunch of shit. And then I get to sit with someone like you and recognize again how little I actually know. So for listeners out there, what are some nuggets? You've already brought some beautiful nuggets to us, but what are some nuggets that you want to share, either from the writing process, from art process? What do you want to share with people?
What you say about wisdom, that is, I understand where you are, and I want you to know that I'm in exactly the same place. That I feel I'm right at the beginning, still, every day. And what I would like people to know is that we are all at the beginning. That every step we take is in a sense the first step. And that is exciting. That the excitement never stops, that once you start on this path towards understanding who you are, understanding your place in the world, understanding more about your relationship with others. Every step is a first step, and the first steps are so exciting. So long as you don't forget that, so long as you don't think, aha, now I know it, now I'm wise, and sit back in your wisdom. And there are people who do that. I've never been able to. I've always realized, I'm pretty much as stupid as I ever was, and that I have more to learn. And it's that understanding that there's more to learn, I think. So I would like to leave people with, there's always more to learn. You never get to that point where you know it, where you understand it. And I would hope to be doing that until the day I die, if I'm able to. And I have to acknowledge there comes a time when the mind begins to fail along with the body. And there may come a time when I'm unable to maintain this level of consciousness. So I hope that time will be brief for me.
Thank you. And how about a wish for fathers out there? So Dear Harry is all about your father. We've touched on how it's different for you with your grandkids. What is a message that you would like to give to fathers out there?
Be honest about yourself. Be honest to yourself. You don't have to know everything. You don't even have to know how to be a father. All you have to know is, all you need is the wish to be a better father every day. And to open your heart. I mean, my mind was closed for so long, and I didn't even know it was closed. And the best thing of me for all was to understand that I could open my heart, and that I was not protecting myself in any way by keeping it closed.
Oof.
And so that would be my wish for fathers, to always be open, always be able to listen, always be able to believe in what you're being told, and not slough it off. Hear your kids. Hear what they have to say. Hear what they have to tell you about their life. And be open with them about yours. Be honest. I'm sure there are
Thank you.
many,
Thank you.
many other
Thank you.
things to say about fatherhood. Those are thoughts that occur to me at this moment.
So what impacted, thank you, that impacted me a lot. And the piece that just kind of burst something open was you're not protecting anything by keeping your heart closed.
Right.
Like that is
It's something we
powerful.
men, even today, learn from childhood on. And it is, perhaps it's a male thing. Um, Girls and women seem much more willing to be open with their feelings than we do. But we tend to fear what might happen if we admit to our feelings and allow them to show. If we cry as little boys, we subject ourselves to ridicule. Those things run very deep, and we learn them from our very early childhood as boys, that it's not safe to show your emotions. If you're angry, keep it in. Don't show it because it's dangerous. You might get into a fight. And, these are things that we learn at a very early age. And so we do learn to protect ourselves. I often think of that concept of armor, the armor that we create around ourselves to protect ourselves, particularly our vulnerable hearts. We create this wonderful armor. It's pretty clever. And we're very efficient at doing it. And we don't realize
Yes.
that not only does it prevent the arrows from coming in, it prevents anything from going out. And it does not prosper us to be armored in that way.
Well said. It does not prosper us to be armored in that way. Yes, a man with words, for sure. So, Peter Clothier, thank you so much for spending some time with me talking about Dear Harry and everything else in our conversation. How should folks find you out there in the world and learn more about your writing and get your books?
Well, the books, first of all, I do hope that this might encourage people to read Dear Harry and maybe look into some of my older books. I wrote a book that influenced many people. It's called Persist, and it's about the creative spirit in an age of commercialism. And so on. There's another book called Mind Work. So I have a number of books out there, all of which touch upon those things that we've been talking about. So I would love people to get their hands on those books. They're easy to reach through Amazon. So they can go to my website, peterclothier.com, which I'm not very good at keeping up to date, but I have an assistant who helps me with that. But that gives a lot of information, has a lot of leads about things that I've written. So I would encourage them to look at that website. Otherwise, it's fairly easy to get in touch with me. I have a Facebook page, Peter Clothier, surprisingly. And I write a lot on that Facebook page because it gives me a platform to do the kind of thing that I've been talking about. And I have quite a number of readers, and I get wonderful response. So you can go on Facebook to Peter Clothier, and you'll be in touch with me. Very easy if you friend me to write me a private message, and I always respond. So.
Thank you, Peter. My wishes and best for Ellie and for you right now. And thank you for spending this time with me.
Well, it has been a pleasure. You know how much we all love to talk about ourselves, and you've given me that opportunity, and I do appreciate it. And it's been wonderful talking to you, boys, and thank you.
Thank you.
This has been the Mankind Podcast, produced in association with the Mankind Project USA. I have been your host, Brandon Clift, and I personally want to thank our guests for joining us today and imparting their wisdom from their experiences in this amazing journey called life. Now, the fee for this episode is simple. If you found gold and insights that you believe could benefit your loved ones and those you care about, be sure to share it with them. And of course, remember that life doesn't happen to us. It happens for us, so long as we rip the pen out of fate's hand and become the author of our own story. So my friend, pick up the pen and we'll see you next week. Lots of love.